Just get the intro out of the way. I want to talk about this right now. Blade Runner 2049 is directed by Denis Villeneuve, the same guy who did Prisoner, Sicario, and Arrival, and is the sequel to Ridley Scott's 1982 masterpiece, Blade Runner. The movie takes place in 2049, as the title of the movie suggests. Ryan Gosling plays K, who is a Blade Runner himself, who is sent out to retire a replicant because that's the job of a Blade Runner, but he comes across something that leads into a much bigger case, and something that eventually leads him to Rick Deckard, played again by Harrison Ford. And that's all I'm going to say about the plot in this movie, because if I say much else about this plot, then I'm going to spoil a lot, and this movie is very much like The Force Awakens, where the less you know about this movie going into it, the better the experience will be. And that's very much what this movie is. This is not just a movie. This is an event. This is one of those movies that comes around once in a while and makes you just fall in love with it. And if you're a film fan, you'll be reminded of how much you love movies to begin with. Because Blade Runner is one of the greatest, most important science fiction movies ever made. I did a review for it last week, so you could definitely check out my thoughts there, but I absolutely love the movie. And usually when a movie is this popular, even if it takes decades, a sequel will come around eventually. For a lot of movies, I'm like, you know what, we probably don't need a sequel, but we'll see where this goes. Blade Runner was always that movie where I thought to myself, no, like even if I didn't quite understand the movie back then, I just thought to myself, there's no way you could do a Blade Runner sequel and make it good. So just don't even try. And especially considering that all of Ridley Scott's movies in this decade have been very, very mediocre and sometimes downright terrible. However, as the movie was going further into production, Ridley Scott was just gonna sit back as an executive producer while Denis Villeneuve, who has done a lot of really good movies, was gonna direct. A lot of Denis Villeneuve's movies have been very good. None of his movies I've downright loved. That was until last year's Arrival, which I absolutely loved. And once I saw that movie, I thought, okay, maybe he can pull off Blade Runner 2049. And holy shit, he has. Not only is this an event film, as I mentioned beforehand, but this is also one of these things where an impossible task is made possible. Not only is Blade Runner 2049 an amazing movie by itself, but it's a fantastic sequel to an already brilliant film. It's not quite as good as the original, but goddamn, there's so many great things about this movie to begin with. One of these great things is the doing of one name, Roger Deakins. If you don't know who Roger Deakins is, he is the best cinematographer working today. He's done a lot of the Coen Brothers movies. He did Skyfall. He's done a lot of other Denis Villeneuve's movies beforehand. And this movie right here is probably his best work to date. It's a gorgeous looking movie that captures the look of the original Blade Runner, but manages to do a lot of things to keep it fresh and new. For example, we go beyond LA in this future. We see other parts of the world and how this future has treated them. And this is one of those things that makes the movie stand out from the original Blade Runner as its own thing, which is something that a good sequel should do. Stay faithful to the movie that came beforehand, while still doing something that's fresh and original. I especially love how the original neo-noir feel of the original Blade Runner is still intact, because watching all the trailers, I was worried if that neo-noir feel that the first movie had would be gone. But no, it's still here. Even if there is a little more of a focus on science fiction than neo-noir, like in the first movie. The color palette is amazing. You get a clear sense of different locations just based on the color palette. The way all of the shots are framed are absolutely incredible. It is a true crime if he doesn't win Best Cinematography for this movie. Now, I did a brief plot summary at the beginning of this video, but the plot of this movie is actually a little more complicated than in the original Blade Runner, but that's not saying it's bad at all, because you are very much engaged in what's going on. There's a lot of mystery to this little case that Ryan Gosling stumbles upon, and a lot of the reason you're engaged is because of the continuous world building that this movie does. and Ryan Gosling's performance. Ryan Gosling as K here is outstanding. This is his movie. He commands the screen, and there's so many very subtle details to his performance that reminds you that he truly is one of the great actors working today. And a lot of his struggles as a character kind of mirrors what happened to Rick Deckard in the first Blade Runner, but not coming across as, oh, we've seen that before. Which, speaking of Rick Deckard, Harrison Ford is also fantastic in this movie. And that's all I'm going to say, because if I say any more about Rick Deckard in this movie, I'll spoil it. The one other thing that always stuck out to me with Blade Runner was the score. And in Blade Runner 2049, the score is fantastic. It's done by Hans Zimmer and Benjamin Wallfisch, and while this score doesn't have the same jazz mixed with synthesizer sound that the original Blade Runner did, it's still an absolutely fantastic score and fits into the world of Blade Runner, even if at points it can be a little overbearing, which is honestly one of my biggest problems with Hans Zimmer as a composer. As great as his film scores are, there are points where it can just dominate the entire movie, sometimes to the point where you can't hear any of the dialogue, which isn't much of a problem in this movie, so that's a good thing. So at the time I'm recording this, I just saw the movie, and I have a difficult time thinking about anything I didn't like about the movie. If I had one criticism, and it's mostly a nitpick, it's that the movie feels too long, and this movie is almost 3 hours long. Whenever a movie is over 2.5 hours long, I just kind of brace myself, but because the plot is so engaging and because you're invested in this world and the characters, the runtime's not that big of an issue because I was completely invested in this movie from beginning to end. It has a great scope of this world, it has great characters, the plot's very engaging, as I mentioned before, and for being almost 3 hours long, the pacing fits very well. I absolutely cannot wait to see this movie again, and I don't normally do this, but I'm debating whether I want to see this movie in 3D, because it's just that gorgeous of a movie that I think it'd be worth it to see it in 3D. So my rating is get off your ass and go see this right now. If you don't see Blade Runner 2049 in the theaters, you are doing yourself and film in general a major disservice, because this right now is my favorite movie of the year, and it's something that you have to see on the big screen. You are not going to get the same experience watching it at home. Just go get your ticket right now. 3D, IMAX, I don't care. You have to see this movie in the theater. And that's my review for Blade Runner 2049. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.